Baku, Azerbaijan, chaos. Yes, that's right, everyone. Welcome back to another video on F1 Hub, and we're going to review the 2024 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So we go to Azerbaijan, and we know there's going to be people in the wall. Familiar sight in recent years has been Charles Leclerc in the wall, so it came to little surprise for anyone really when Charles Leclerc crashed out in the opening 10 minutes of free practice 1. However, this wasn't the only time a Ferrari went into the wall. Yes, Charles Leclerc was the one with the headline shunt, and he was out pretty much straight away into the session. Carlos Sainz also went off during the session too. Ferrari came off the back of their recent Monza victory in front of their home fans for the Italian Grand Prix, where Charles Leclerc somehow won his Monaco Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix, so that means Charles Leclerc's luck's about to come to an end. The same can be said for Williams, with Franco Colapinto, after his pretty decent Italian Grand Prix performance, shunting in the first 20 minutes of the session in free practice. Of course, it's a circuit where, it's a street circuit, so basically not many people drive around that track apart from normal cars. It's the only time all year round it's even used for racing, and Franco Colapinto found out that this track's quite dusty by hitting the wall. However, many drivers were off the road during this session. There was many drivers, including his teammate Alexander Albon, who forgot which way the Baku circuit actually went by going off at a corner. After all, it's Azerbaijan, right? A track I wasn't even looking forward to this year, despite the fact that it normally throws up some chaos. However, this year, yellow flags seem to be alien to the entire field, so when you get people going off in free practice, like Valtteri Bottas, it's a bit of fun. To be fair, free practice this year is actually quite more exciting than the actual race, at least at the start of the year. Okay, it's not really, but we actually get yellow flags and stuff like that. Valtteri Bottas went off the road for Kick Sauber, as he still hasn't got a seat next year. I rather get the feeling Bortoletto could actually replace him at Kick Sauber next year. Also with issues was Esteban Ocon, whose miserable weekend began with an engine failure. That meant he would miss out some FP2, and things would only just get worse from there. Alpine are on a good run of form, and when I say good, I mean absolutely rubbish. Alpine haven't scored points in quite a while. In fact, I can't even remember the last time they did. I also can't remember the last time Lewis Hamilton out-qualified a teammate. I just can't. Maybe Spa, maybe? Lewis Hamilton went off the road, but he wasn't the only Mercedes. George Russell went also off the road at the first corner. Mercedes have shown recent form in free practice, where they top every single session, and then come qualifying, Lewis Hamilton's mysteriously down in 7th place, or something like that. Also, at the end of FP1, though, it was a familiar or unfamiliar, as 2024 has proven, name at the top of the timesheet, with Max Verstappen topping the session. Lewis Hamilton was somehow in 2nd place, and Sergio Perez completed the top 3, and let's move on to free practice 2. Charles Leclerc, not content with crashing his car in FP1, went off at the exact same corner, except this time he didn't hit the wall. However, Ferrari were looking quick, as was Verstappen, this time coming close to hitting the wall. However, Red Bull continued to struggle in free practice, and Sergio Perez rounded out 2nd place, with Lewis Hamilton rounding out that top 3. Charles Leclerc topped the session overall and looked pretty quick. Meanwhile, Franco Colapinto, who also shunted his car in free practice 1, hit the barriers too, but this time he didn't cause any long-lasting damage. Kevin Magnussen has a controversial race ban, and that means Ollie Behrman is of course in his seat. And Ollie Behrman was doing a pretty good job, starting to outpace Nico Hülkenberg. But come free practice 3, the only thing he outpaced was how quick it took to get into the barriers, as he was the only man and first man to hit the wall during free practice 3. Ollie Behrman will of course be part of that American team next year, and now I'm starting to sound like those free practice commentators on the YouTube channel F1, so let's just move on from Ollie Behrman. There was many people again going off in free practice 3, but admittedly less. Yet again, Pierre Gasly nearly made contact with the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Esteban Ocon wasn't making contact with anyone though, as he had yet another issue, and this time it was terminal, and you wouldn't see Esteban Ocon for the rest of the session. Free practice 3 concluded with George Russell topping the session, but also locking up his car, as he topped the session again ahead of that Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who will no doubt be the favourite for pole, as Mercedes still don't understand how to get from free practice to qualifying. So it's over to qualifying now, and Max Verstappen was at serious risk. crashing out at the last corner, well, nearly crashing out the last corner, certainly didn't help his causes, as it is Max Verstappen would ultimately make it through to the next part of qualifying, but there was a few who weren't. That included Esteban Ocon, who, whilst on a push lap, hit the wall, giving himself a puncture. He's had many mechanical failures all weekend long, so this is just the icing on the cake for Alpine. What wasn't the icing on the cake, though, was Lando Norris, who was then out in Q1 as a result of all of this chaos. The yellow flag came out in the final sector, which basically ended Lando Norris's World Championship hopes, as well as his qualifying session in the process. I've always said that if a big person like Norris or Verstappen would get knocked out in a session, it would give the other practically the championship, and Norris starting 17th on the grid certainly isn't a good thing, or rated 16th, because Gasly's now been disqualified. So that's bloody great for Alpine, isn't it? Joe Guanyu was out-qualified by Valtteri Bottas again and washed up Daniel Ricciardo was in 16th. I actually quite like Daniel Ricciardo, and sometimes he's good, but clearly not this weekend. Let's just move on to Q2 then, and Ollie Behrman nearly got through to Q3 and knocking out Alex Albon, who clearly was starting to get beaten by Colapinto, who was only in his second F1 race. This kind of proves that Alex Albon is slightly overrated. Behrman couldn't make it through, though it was only 11th, and Hülkenberg was out-qualified for only the 4th time all year long, and that was with Ollie Behrman, who makes his best qualifying performance of 11th place. So let's move into Q3 now, and Max Verstappen was struggling. He was behind Sergio Perez, which is basically, in other words, makes Max Verstappen clearly washed. Sergio Perez, however, is amazing at the circuit, so I have to say I did predict him to be on pole position, didn't I? It turns out he wouldn't quite be. The Ferraris locked out the front row on run number 1, with Oscar Piastri in 3rd. Lewis Hamilton was 5/10 off his teammate on run number 1, and as a Lewis Hamilton fan, you can understand how that made me feel. Anyway, come Q3, Charles Leclerc dominated pole position again to take it by like 0.3 of a second from Oscar Piastri, who at least made it onto the front row. However, we know what Ferrari are like at Azerbaijan, and the fact Leclerc's never won at the circuit means we've got plenty of hope for a good race tomorrow. However, with Lewis Hamilton starting in 7th place, his hopes of outscoring George Russell in the World Championship clearly aren't going to go well. Oh yes, Sergio Perez out-qualified Verstappen, and Franco Colapinto out-qualified his teammate, so let's hope Hamilton can get loads of points. Oh wait, now he's starting from the pit lane. So that's amazing, and let's just hope... Oh, actually, no, wait, hang on a second. Lando Norris starts near the back of the field, so he can't possibly lose a place on the opening lap, can he? Imagine if he does end up 18th at the launch off the line. So let's go into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So the race began and Charles Leclerc actually got a good launch off the line once again. Oscar Piastri unfortunately couldn't do a repeat of Italy 2024 a couple of weeks back. Instead, he locked up at the first corner. Also, a fun fact, though a lot of people may not actually know it, is that Lando Norris didn't actually get a good launch off the line and actually dropped a place. Really retook that back by the end of the opening lap, I'm not sure, but he definitely didn't get a good launch off the line. Speaking of launches off the line, Lance Stroll launched into Yuki Tsunoda, ending both of their races pretty much instantly as they trundled around at the back of the field for a couple of laps before retiring. Stroll retired after having a puncture and a later brake issue, but Lando Norris got stuck in fighting the pack and made up some places at the end of the opening lap and continued that on lap 2. McLaren didn't play everything right though once again. Oscar Piastri was getting caught by an undercutting from Sergio Perez, and Lando Norris had to back Oscar Piastri despite the team orders that had been implemented this weekend. So it's kind of strange. Sounds kind of strange to say that Lando Norris was actually playing the team game to help Piastri. Speaking of Piastri, he took the lead of this race, with Charles Leclerc coming back, but he still hasn't won this Azerbaijan Grand Prix despite taking 4 pole positions. The battle continued over several laps, and arriving on the scene was Sergio Perez, who I predicted was going to win this Azerbaijan Grand Prix. As you can see, that particularly aged well. Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, though, had a big battle over who would go ahead, as Norris squeezed Verstappen after all. He hadn't pitted yet. Max Verstappen was being completely outperformed by his teammate, a sentence I don't think I'll ever say again in Formula 1. Verstappen even missed a corner behind Lando Norris and couldn't make the move. Eventually, Lando Norris pitted and we resumed the battle for the lead as Charles Leclerc was trundling around behind Oscar Piastri. On lap 29 of 51, he got pretty close to making an overtake, and every single lap he would get close, but wasn't close enough to make the move. Over several more laps, George Russell was catching Max Verstappen, and Charles Leclerc had yet another go on Oscar Piastri 5 laps later, as Charles Leclerc still couldn't get the move. Meanwhile, Russell had caught and passed Max Verstappen as a Mercedes overtook a Red Bull for the first time since 2021. George Russell got ahead and ultimately finished ahead of Max Verstappen, who was hoping to outscore Lando Norris, who was still closing in. Meanwhile, the fight for the lead continued, as Lando Norris didn't matter anyway, as he got past Max Verstappen. One cannot help think if Lando Norris had not been out in Q1. Meanwhile, in the closing stages, Sergio Perez was on for P2 at the race. Considering I predicted him to be as a great driver this weekend, I was feeling pretty happy with my predictions. After all, he's had such a bad run of wait. Oscar Piastri may have won the race, but at the end of the day, the big talking point at the end of the last lap was Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez come together. So next time I predict someone to win the race, you know they're going to end in the barriers with a lap to go. This promoted Charles Leclerc to second and George Russell to complete the podium. But despite all of this, Oscar Piastri won the Grand Prix, and without the controversy of his first Grand Prix win, and that means McLaren take the Constructors' lead by 20 points. It was an amazing Grand Prix and one of the best of the year. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to keep up with all my latest predictions and race reviews, including all my classic races, which I do as well, currently doing the 2007 season. If that's something you find interesting, consider hitting that subscribe button.